Let's be honest, we all lie. Little white lies, lies of omission. We're all architects of falsehood in our own small ways, but that's not the scary part. The truly terrifying part isn't the lies we tell, but the lies we believe. Especially the lies we believe together. What if I told you that your mind, your brilliant, rational, intelligent mind, has a series of back doors, hidden vulnerabilities, that can be exploited not just to make you believe something that isn't true, but to make an entire society, a whole civilization, lose its grip on reality? What if I told you that the same psychological forces that led to the frenzied witch hunts of the 16th century, the rise of totalitarian states in the 20th, and the bizarre panics that have erupted throughout history are not just relics of a bygone era, they're still at play, right now, quietly shaping your reality, influencing your decisions, and defining your enemies. Throughout history, entire societies of smart, rational people have fallen into a state of mass delusion. They've persecuted their neighbors, embraced suicidal ideologies, and committed unspeakable acts, all while believing they were on the side of reason and virtue. The question is, would you know if you were in one? We all lie, but that's not what's really scary. The scary part is how easily we believe lies, especially when we believe them together. What if the same psychological forces that sparked the witch hunts and fueled the rise of totalitarian states are still active today, quietly shaping your world? Time and time again, entire societies of smart, rational people have fallen into mass delusion. So the real question is, would you know if it was happening to you? To understand how a whole society can go mad, we first have to understand why you, a single, intelligent person, can be so easily fooled. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Our brains didn't evolve to seek objective, capital T truth. Human intelligence evolved as a tool for survival, for maintaining social bonds, and for navigating the complex hierarchies of our tribes. In short, our brains are built for belonging, not for perfect logic. And this wiring has left us with a set of cognitive shortcuts or biases that can lead us catastrophically astray. Think of these biases as the operating system of your mind, running silently in the background. Most of the time, they work just fine. They help us make quick decisions and navigate a world overflowing with information. But they are also exploitable. They are the vulnerabilities that allow the virus of a lie to enter the system. Let's start with the big one: confirmation bias. This is our brain's tendency to actively hunt for, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe. At the same time, we tend to ignore or discredit anything that challenges us. It's not passive, it's an active search. When you scroll through your social media feed, you're not just consuming information. Your brain is a heat-seeking missile for validation. Every headline that aligns with your worldview delivers a tiny hit of dopamine, a neurochemical reward that says, yes, you're right. The world is exactly as you see it. On the flip side, when you see something that contradicts your core beliefs, it can feel like a personal attack. Psychologists have found that facts challenging our deep-seated beliefs can actually trigger the brain's threat response system. The amygdala, our primal fight-or-flight center, lights up. Reason gets hijacked. It no longer feels like a debate. It feels like a battle for survival. This is why arguing with someone deep in a belief system is so often pointless. You think you're having a rational discussion, but their brain is treating you like a saber-toothed tiger. The result is often the backfire effect, where trying to correct a false belief with facts just makes the person cling to it even tighter. And smart people aren't immune. In fact, they can be even more susceptible. Why? Because a high IQ doesn't just mean you're good at solving problems. It means you're good at coming up with justifications. An intelligent person can build more sophisticated, more convincing arguments for why their biased belief is actually pure logic. They're better at building the fortress of rationalization around their initial emotional conclusion. Next up, we have the anchoring bias. This is our tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information we get. That first piece becomes the anchor against which all other information is judged. Think about a negotiation. The first number thrown out for a car or a salary powerfully shapes the final price. In the world of beliefs, the first story we hear about a complex event can become our anchor. Even if later information debunks it, our minds struggle to pull away. Propagandists are masters of this. They know the power of being first. They want to plant their flag, their anchor, in your mind before anyone else gets a chance. Then there's the sneaky, illusory truth effect. The principle is almost laughably simple. The more we hear something, the more we believe it's true. Repetition creates familiarity, and our brains mistake that familiar feeling for a sign of truthfulness. A lie, repeated often enough, starts to feel like a fact. It doesn't need evidence or logic. It just needs airtime. Propaganda machines are built on this. The goal is saturation. To repeat a slogan or a claim so relentlessly that it seeps into the cultural wallpaper, becoming the default thought you don't even think to question. Finally, let's look at naive realism. This is the quiet, arrogant assumption that I see the world objectively, just as it is. It's everyone else, especially those who disagree with me, who are biased, irrational, or simply misinformed. This bias is the invisible foundation of so much conflict. It stops us from genuinely considering other perspectives because we've already decided they're defective. It's the voice in our head that says, if you would only look at the facts, you'd see that I'm right. But we forget that we're all looking at the facts through the powerful distorting lenses of our own minds. These quirks aren't a sign of stupidity. They're universal features of being human. They're the brain's shortcuts. But this very system, designed to help us, creates the perfect entry points for mass delusion. A charismatic leader or a viral algorithm doesn't need flawless logic. They just need to exploit these bugs in our mental software. They anchor a simple idea, repeat it until it feels true, and create an environment where agreeing feels good and disagreeing feels like a threat. And just like that, the stage is set. But to really grasp the terrifying power of mass delusion, we have to go deeper than just cognitive shortcuts. We need to venture into the darker, more turbulent waters of the human psyche. And for that, there's no better guide than the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Jung believed that the greatest threat to civilization wasn't famine or war. He argued that the real danger lies within us, in our inability to deal with the forces of our own psyche. He witnessed the rise of Nazism in the 20th century, not just as a political movement, but as what he termed a psychic epidemic, an outbreak of mass psychosis. Now, to be clear, Jung wasn't using psychosis as a clinical diagnosis you'd find in a modern medical manual. He was using it as a powerful metaphor to describe what happens when a large part of a society loses its grip on reality and falls into a shared delusion. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it coming when he wrote, "In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." So how does this happen? Jung's answer, it really lies in two key concepts, the collective unconscious and the shadow. The collective unconscious, well, it's a deep, inherited layer of our psyche, shared by all of humanity. It's a sort of psychic blueprint, containing universal patterns and symbols, which Jung called archetypes. Think of, say, the hero, the wise old man, the trickster, primordial themes that pop up in myths, dreams, and religions across all cultures and all of history. Now, one of the most potent of these archetypes is the shadow. The shadow is the dark side of our personality. It's where we hide all the negative, undeveloped parts of ourselves that we repress and deny: our greed, our rage, our envy, our fears. It's everything that conflicts with our conscious self-image, our kaka persona, our I. Everyone has a shadow. A healthy person learns to recognize and integrate it, to acknowledge their capacity for darkness without being ruled by it. But what happens when we don't? What happens when we deny our shadow completely? The answer is projection. Projection is a defense mechanism where we unconsciously take the parts of ourselves we can't accept and pin them on someone else. You see it every day. The office gossip who's convinced everyone is talking about them. The unfaithful partner who becomes consumed with jealousy. They've taken the darkness they can't face within themselves and projected it outward, painting it onto another person or group. Now, imagine this happening on the scale of an entire society. This is the key to mass psychosis. When a society is under stress, facing economic collapse, social upheaval, or just a creeping sense of anxiety, people become vulnerable. Fear weakens our rational minds and opens the door to the unconscious. In this state of collective panic, a society can project its collective shadow. An entire nation, unwilling to face its own internal failings, projects that darkness onto a designated scapegoat, an ethnic minority, a political opponent, anyone branded as the other. This group becomes the screen upon which the society projects everything it hates and fears about itself. They're no longer seen as people. They're seen as the living embodiment of evil. The witch. The traitor. The enemy of the people. This is catastrophically effective for two reasons. First, it offers a huge sense of relief and moral superiority. The problem isn't us, it's them. Our crusade against them isn't aggression, it's an act of purification. This explains how ordinary, decent people can participate in horrific acts. In a state of mass psychosis, they believe they aren't committing crimes, they're fighting monsters. Second, this shared delusion creates a powerful, intoxicating bond. Loneliness and isolation are key preconditions for mass psychosis. People who feel disconnected crave purpose and belonging. The delusion provides it. By uniting against a demonized enemy, a fragmented society is fused into a fanatical whole. The shared belief, no matter how irrational, becomes a sacred pact. To question the delusion is blasphemy. It's to betray the group and align yourself with darkness. This is why dissent is so brutally suppressed. The delusion can only survive if it's absolute. Jung saw this psychic engine driving the witch hunts and the totalitarian regimes of his time, and he warned that modern enlightened societies weren't immune. In fact, he feared that mass media could make these psychic epidemics spread faster and wider than ever before. We're a species that carries a dark shadow in our collective soul, and when we refuse to look at it, we're doomed to find it walking toward us wearing the face of our neighbor. These ideas aren't just abstract theories. They're the keys to unlocking some of the most bizarre and terrifying episodes in human history. These events are chilling case studies, laboratories of madness, that show how the virus of delusion can infect an entire population. Let's start with a curious case: the Seattle windshield pitting epidemic of 1954. That spring, reports surfaced in Washington state of mysterious tiny pits appearing on car windshields. At first, it was a local oddity, but soon, the phenomenon exploded, and as it reached Seattle, panic took hold. What was causing it? No one knew, and that uncertainty created a vacuum that theories rushed to fill. The most popular one? Radioactive fallout from H-bomb tests in the Pacific. The invisible, terrifying threat of radiation gave a tangible form to the deep anxieties of the Cold War. The media ran sensational headlines, fanning the flames. People started covering their cars. The mayor of Seattle appealed to the president for help. Police were swamped with calls from panicked citizens who, upon looking closely, were now finding pits on their own windshields. Here we see the psychological mechanisms in perfect alignment. First, anchoring bias. The initial reports anchored the idea of a new threat. Then, confirmation bias kicked into high gear. Once people believed their windshields, well, they could be pitted. They went looking for evidence, and they found it. Every tiny, insignificant nick from normal road debris was reinterpreted as proof. This was amplified by social conformity. When your neighbors and the news are all convinced a threat is real, it's hard to remain a skeptic. So, what was the real cause? After a full investigation, scientists and police concluded there was no epidemic. The epidemic was a pure creation of mass perception, a mass psychogenic illness. Once official reports declared it a delusion, the panic vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. But sometimes, the delusion demands a blood sacrifice. Let's go back to 1518 to Strasbourg, France, in an event known as the Dancing Plague. It started with one woman, Frau Trophea, who walked into the street and began to dance, and dance, and dance. Within a week, 30 people had joined her. Within a month, around 400 people were dancing uncontrollably in the streets. The city authorities were baffled. Based on the medical knowledge of the time, they diagnosed the dancers with hot blood and prescribed a seemingly logical cure: more dancing. They cleared out halls, built a stage, and even hired musicians, believing the dancers needed to sweat the fever out. This, of course, only amplified the hysteria. People literally danced until they collapsed, with some reportedly dying from heart attacks and strokes. What was going on? Historians believe it was another case of mass psychogenic illness, fueled by profound despair. Life in 16th century Strasbourg was brutal, marked by famine, disease, and poverty. The dancing appears to have been a hysterical, physical release of unbearable psychological trauma, spreading not by a germ, but by psychic contagion. This brings us to the quintessential example: the Salem witch trials of 1692. It all began when a few young girls in Salem Village started having strange fits, convulsions, screaming, contortions. In their rigid, paranoid Puritan world, where the devil was a real and active force, the diagnosis was swift: bewitchment. Here we see Jung's theory of the projected shadow in its most horrific form. Puritan society was intensely repressive, leaving no room for anger, sexuality, or doubt. Those impulses had to be buried. The bewitched girls acted out all this repressed psychic energy. And the community, instead of looking at the crushing nature of its own social order, simply projected its collective shadow onto a series of scapegoats. The first accused, they were outsiders: Tituba, an enslaved woman; Sarah Good, a beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an unpopular elderly woman. They were perfect screens for projection. The girls, spectral evidence, those claims of being tormented by apparitions, well, it was accepted as fact. A terrifying example, really, of emotional belief overriding all logic. Confirmation bias? It ran wild. Every failed crop or sick cow, it was reinterpreted as proof of witchcraft. The intelligence of the judges and ministers didn't save them. Even educated men like Cotton Mather used their intellects. They built theological and legal justifications for the persecution, essentially lending their authority to the hysteria. Before the madness ended, 19 innocent people were hanged. Others died in prison. And one man, well, he was crushed to death with stones. The Salem trials are the ultimate cautionary tale. They show how fear, a rigid ideology, and a projected shadow can lead a community of supposedly rational people to murder their own. These aren't just historical curiosities. No, they're warnings. Mass delusions don't always bubble up on their own. Sometimes they're intentionally engineered. Individuals and groups who understand the fault lines of the human psyche. They've learned how to create and direct mass psychosis for their own power. So, what's the recipe? How do you deliberately engineer a mass delusion? The process, chillingly, follows a clear pattern. First off, step 1, sow fear and isolate. The foundation is always fear. A population needs to be destabilized and atomized. You create an atmosphere of pervasive anxiety, either from a real threat like a war or a plague, or an imagined one, like a vast internal conspiracy. This fear makes people more suggestible, and it breaks down the social bonds that keep them grounded. A key tactic is isolation. When people are disconnected from friends and family, they have no one to reality check their perceptions with. Their world shrinks to the narrative being fed to them. Step 2. Provide a simple, unfalsifiable explanation. Into this chaos, the architect of delusion introduces a simple, emotionally satisfying explanation for all the fear. It points to a single, easily identifiable source of all problems, a scapegoat, the bankers, the foreigners, the intellectuals. The target changes, but the structure is always the same. This explanation must be simple, resonant, and, crucially, unfalsifiable. Conspiracy theories are perfect for this. Any lack of evidence, that's just proof of the cover-up. Any evidence to the contrary, that's dismissed as enemy disinformation. The logic is a closed loop. Step 3. Saturate the environment and suppress dissent. Once the narrative is set, it must be amplified until it becomes reality. This is done through relentless propaganda. The message must be everywhere, repeated constantly, until the illusory truth effect kicks in, and it becomes the background noise of life. At the same time, all dissenting voices must be silenced. This isn't just censorship, it's about making dissent socially and professionally suicidal. Dissenters are ridiculed, demonized, and branded as traitors or heretics. This creates a spiral of silence, where opposing views are never heard, distorting everyone's perception of public opinion. Step 4. Offer salvation and demand total allegiance. The final step is to present the movement or leader as the only path to salvation. They alone can defeat the scapegoat and restore order. But this salvation, it comes at a price: total allegiance. Individuals must surrender their personal judgment to the will of the group, merging their identity with the collective. This offers a powerful psychological reward, a release from the burden of individual responsibility and a sense of purpose in a chaotic world. This 4-step playbook, fear, a simple narrative, saturation, and a demand for allegiance, it's the blueprint for manufacturing madness. It hijacks our cognitive biases, it exploits our deepest needs, and it channels the dark energy of our collective shadow. It's how thinking individuals are transformed into an unthinking mass. Understanding this playbook, it isn't just academic, it's an act of self-defense. So if society is prone to these nightmares of madness, what can one person do? Are we doomed to be swept away by the next tide of insanity? The answer from thinkers like Jung is a resounding no. The antidote to mass psychosis is not a political program. The antidote is the conscious, courageous, sovereign individual. Forging this mental sovereignty isn't easy. It takes work. It requires building habits of mind that run contrary to our lazy, biased nature. But it is possible. First, practice ruthless self-awareness. You have to become a student of your own mind. That starts by admitting you're vulnerable. Accept that you have cognitive biases, just like everyone else. The moment you think you're immune is the moment you become their easiest victim. Pay attention to your emotional reactions. When you hear something, do you feel a jolt of pleasure or a spike of anger? Those are red flags. They signal that your biases have been triggered and your rational mind is in danger of being hijacked. Second, actively seek dissenting opinions. You have to consciously fight the comfortable echo chamber of confirmation bias. Make it a discipline to seek out the smartest, most articulate arguments against your own beliefs. Don't do it just to find flaws or prep your counterarguments. Do it with the genuine, humble intention of understanding another point of view. It's difficult. It can feel unpleasant, but it's the most effective way to break the spell of your own biases. As the philosopher John Stuart Mill said, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that." Third, acknowledge your own shadow. This is Jung's great prescription. Do the hard work of self-reflection to understand your own capacity for anger, resentment, and cruelty. The more you're aware of the darkness in you, the less likely you are to project it onto others. Someone who has done their shadow work is far less likely to fall for scapegoating narratives, because they can recognize that same dark potential in themselves. They understand that the line between good and evil runs not between groups, but down the center of every human heart. Fourth, value truth over your tribe. This might be the hardest step of all. In a world where our identities are so tied to our political or cultural tribes, you have to cultivate an identity that's centered on the search for truth itself. You must be willing, if the evidence demands it, to disappoint your own side. This can be lonely. The desire to belong is a powerful human drive. But you have to emancipate yourself from the grip of the group psyche. Fifth, speak a simple truth. You don't have to be a hero. But when you see a lie being told, especially within your own group, you have a responsibility not to agree to it with your silence. Speaking a simple, obvious truth in an environment of delusion can be a powerful act. It can break the spiral of silence and show other, quieter dissenters that they aren't alone. As the dissident-turned-president Václav Havel wrote, "A single person living in truth can disrupt an entire system built on lies." These practices don't guarantee perfect objectivity, but they are a form of mental and spiritual training. They build a core of inner resilience that can withstand the immense psychological pressure of the herd. In an age of digital mobs, the most radical act is to think for yourself. We started with a question. Would you know if you were in a state of mass delusion? By now, you know the answer isn't so simple. The human mind is a flawed instrument, and the pull of the crowd, it's a siren song that has lured entire civilizations onto the rocks. But understanding the machinery of delusion, that's the first step toward breaking free. You now know how to spot the wires of manipulation. You can recognize confirmation bias in your own thinking and see the archetype of the shadow being projected onto the scapegoats of our time. You have the tools to begin forging your own mental sovereignty. This isn't just an intellectual game, it's the fundamental challenge of our era. In a world saturated with propaganda, the battle for the future, it'll be fought on the terrain of the individual human mind. The choice is between conscious awareness and hypnotic slumber. The world doesn't change through mass movements alone. It changes when one person wakes up, then another, and another. Awakening, like a psychic epidemic, can also be contagious. But it spreads not through fear, but through clarity, not through anger, but through courage. If this journey resonated with you, subscribe to the channel for more content that challenges you to think deeper. Like this video to help it reach others who are asking these same questions. And in the comments below, share one way you plan to strengthen your own mind against collective delusion. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Remember, the revolution doesn't start in the streets. It starts in your head. It begins the moment you have the courage to ask, "Are my thoughts really my own?" And then have the quiet strength to find out.